Yemenis continue celebrating anniversary of the 14th of October revolution when Aden is in chaos and Sana'a under Houthi suppression. United Nations Special Envoy Hans Grunberg briefs Security Council amid Houthi escalation in Ma'rib. European Union and International Migration Organization discuss the situation of displacement. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rana Sweden. In Hodeidah, the General People's Congress in District 181 in Hais organized a cultural event on the occasion of September and October revolutions. During the event, poems and speeches have been delivered. Also, the importance of Yemeni women's participation in democratic and political life was addressed too. In Pakistan, the Yemeni community organized a celebration on the occasion of the Yemeni Revolution feasts in September and October. The General Union of Yemeni Students in Pakistan contributed to the event with expressive speeches, and the ceremony included Yemeni folklore dances, highlighting these two national occasions and what the country is going through today. As part of his tour in the region, the U.S. envoy to Yemen, Tim Linderking, discussed with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Badr al-Busaidi peace efforts in the country. The Omani news agency reported that Minister of Foreign Affairs exchanged views with the U.S. envoy on the latest developments on the Yemeni arena and the efforts being made to end the war. Hans Grunberg gave his second briefing on Yemen before the Security Council yesterday. The following report attempts to track what the envoy said and what's left unsaid.
For the second time, Grunberg is addressing the United Nations Security Council. The importance of this briefing lies that it came after his first trip to Yemen and the region. He said during the briefing he has conducted numerous consultations with Yemeni, regional and international actors, focusing on the question of how to move towards a sustainable political solution to end the conflict. Yemenis, without exception, stressed the necessity to end the war, he reported, noting that they also highlighted the urgency of addressing economic and humanitarian concerns, including stabilizing the economy, improving the delivery of basic services, and facilitating freedom of movement. Yemenis also acknowledged that their country cannot be effectively ruled by one group alone and that a durable peace will require pluralism, he added, underscoring the need for a comprehensive negotiated political settlement that should restore the functioning of state institutions and pave the way for economic recovery and development. It should also provide for accountable governance and the rule of law and promote and protect Yemenis' full range of human rights. Let us not fool ourselves. This will be a laborious and complicated task that will take time, but it must take place, he stated. On his part, humanitarian chief said humanitarian crisis continues to deepen, leaving more than two-thirds of the population in need of assistance from aid agencies. The immediate cause of this suffering is the war, he said, adding that the conflict has intensified in recent weeks and that a ceasefire remains elusive. Funding for aid efforts is not adequate to continue to meet the needs of the almost 13 million people across the country who depend on it. Warning that funding for water delivery and hospitals will run out by the end of November and that aid for food, health, water, sanitation and hygiene programs have only received a fraction of the required funding. He called for continued support. Several delegates expressed serious concern regarding the prevalence of human rights violations in Yemen, voicing disappointment over the failure of the Human Rights Council to renew the mandate of the group of eminent experts. On his part, the representative of Yemen expressed hope that the special envoy's efforts will contribute to ending the crisis. However, he underscored that while the government is ready to cooperate, Houthis have continued their futile war, killing women and children with drones, snipers and mines. Council members were united in their support for the special envoy's mediation efforts and called for all parties to the conflict and the international community to put the plight of the Yemenis first and foremost. In short, would Grumberg be able to make a breakthrough that his predecessor didn't? Or would Yemenis be again the victims of helpless and pointless briefings that can say nothing on the ground?
United Nations warned from devastating repercussions on civilians due to fighting in Ma'rib, Al-Bayda and Chabwa. Stéphane Dujarric, spokesman for the Secretary General of the United Nations, said that this escalation has increasingly devastating repercussions on civilians. He stressed on the need for facilitating safe, timely and sustainable humanitarian access to all affected areas in Yemen. The charge d'affaires of European Union in Yemen, Marion Lalisse, met with head of the International Organization of Migration Mission in Yemen, Christa Rottensteiner, and stressed that aid access to entire Yemen must be granted. The two parties shared mutual concern over Houthi escalation in Ma'rib. Lalisse affirmed that EU is working closely with International Organization of Migration and other partners to help displaced people and migrants in the country. The current Houthi offensive in Ma'rib has caused new waves of displaced people. Now entire areas are under stifling Houthi siege. This puts local civilians and displaced people under great risks. More on this story is within this report.
Ma'rib is witnessing a new wave of displacement from Al-Juba district due to Houthi militia escalation. Further, the suffocating siege continues on tens of thousands of residents in the neighboring district of Al-Abdiyah has complicated the situation. Reports show that nearly half of the displaced live within 5 kilometers from the line of confrontations. The International Organization for Migration's Displacement Tracking Unit estimated that about 3,000 people fled during the 6 days from September 26th to October the 2nd. Meanwhile, other reports confirm that more than 1 million displaced Yemenis have settled in more than 1,600 spontaneous unplanned camps and need support to meet their basic needs. Locations, population size, and characteristics of these camps change over time. According to recent reports, 76% of IDP sites lack formal land lease agreements, which can lead to secondary displacement and sometimes create threats of eviction and may lead to tertiary displacement. 32% of sites are at risk of flooding, and approximately 48% of people in IDP hosting sites are within 5 kilometers of active hostilities areas. Displacement sites also lack services. More than half of the sites could not be reached by humanitarian actors, and 93% of camp-like places across the country lack basic services such as food distribution, protection services, water, sanitation, and education. 83% of the displaced now face critical service gaps. In a related context, the local authority in Ma'rib Governorate declared Abdiyah district a disaster area due to tight siege imposed on the city by Houthis for more than 25 days. Houthi militia prevents food passage, medicine, water and other basic needs, and the continuous bombardment of civilians at residential villages has deepened people's suffering. According to the health office, Al-Abdiyah district is facing a human tragedy due to the siege that threatens lives of 37,000 people, most of whom are children, women and elders. For his part, the UN's chief humanitarian official in Yemen said that the ongoing conflict and violence across the country continues to severely impact the population that is in dire need of an end to the fighting so that they can rebuild their lives.
I see the destruction of schools, of factories, of roads and bridges. I've seen the destruction of power systems. So what made Yemen work 7 years ago in many cases no longer exists. We're also concerned now with the escalation in fighting around Ma'rib. This is now added to additional displacement,
said David Grizzly, the UN resident and humanitarian coordinator. After all, can the international community pressure make Houthis stop atrocities in Abdiyah? Or Abdiyah would fall in the hands of this monster, just like other parts of the country have.
Tribal leaders and security officials said that fighting in Ma'rib has killed at least 140 Houthi fighters during this week. The most intense clashes erupted during the past 24 hours in Al-Bayda and Al-Juba. Turning to Hudaydah, Houthi militias targeted residential villages in Al Jabaliyah, south of Tuhaita. Local sources stated that Houthi targeting was indiscriminate. This caused fear among civilians and disrupted their work and public tranquility. In Taiz, 2 people have been killed and another wounded by unknown gunmen in the city center. Our correspondent stated that gunmen riding a motorcycle fired a barrage of bullets at pedestrians on Al Tahrir Street, killing 2 people and wounding a third. Coming next. Houthis make use of religious occasions to get financial gains.
أقول لك راحت بالغداء لأهلها شلت الغداء وراحت بالأهلها في المزرعة. والمزرعة ركبت على حمار ما حتى نص المزرعة وانفجر فيها اللغم. دعست على اللغم وانفجر فيهم. الحمار انتهى ما أدرى وتبقعت رجليها كامل. نغير منها نغير الشبالة اللي هي البيت سابها من دور رجليها لما صافناها طبية أقرب طبية وصافناها هي بطلت رجليها كامل.
قلت الزود هلي وقابل لي لعام وطبعته تحت الزواية.
Welcome back. As the war extends in the country, the risk of people falling victims of famine is increasing. Although the World Aid agencies have been doing immense efforts in providing food and basic commodities, yet some people still do not have access to food. The following report has more on this story.
The United Nations said that about 16 million citizens, representing more than half of the population of Yemen, suffer from hunger. United Nations also indicated that about 80% of Yemenis need assistance and that 400,000 children under the age of 5 suffer from acute malnutrition. Yemen relies on imports for a large part of its food needs, and the warring parties for nearly 6 years, which have severely disrupted these supplies. Before the war, Yemen was a poor country with a malnutrition problem, but it was a country with a functioning economy and a government that provided services to a large number of its people. The war has destroyed that to a large extent. 12 aid organizations, including Oxfam, Save the Children, and Care International, have warned that 2.3 million children under the age of 5 in Yemen will go hungry this year if governments do not increase their funding. British newspapers have focused on several issues, most notably the threat of starvation that threatens more millions in Yemen, the start of negotiations between the United Kingdom and Iran at the level of foreign ministers, in addition to easing restrictions that were imposed to limit the spread of coronavirus. A report published by the Guardian newspaper said that 5 million people in Yemen are on the verge of starvation that may sweep the country, while another 16 million people are on the path to that starvation. Experts described that the situation in civil war-torn Yemen as rapidly deteriorating, according to a World Food Programme report, which expressed concerns about the possibility of seeing massive increases in the number of Yemenis at risk of starvation over the next few weeks and months. The kids, the women, and the men, and every single person is struggling from severe malnutrition. Yemenis are living a very hard reality, and the international organizations has to end the suffering.
On International Rural Women's Day, women in Yemen are still suffering bitterly as a result of Houthi militia war in the country. According to international reports, Yemeni women are considered the most affected by war. Women lost their children and some find themselves forced to bear the burdens of the family, at a time when the Houthi militia is forcibly pushing men, youth, and children to battlefronts. Houthis make use of religious occasions to sap Yemeni pockets and use the money to fund their war and sectarian project against Yemen. The coming report sheds light on Houthi violations of religious events.
Instead of using religious events to group people together under love, fraternity and solidarity, Houthi rebels in Yemen do the very opposite. Houthis, who captured the Yemeni capital 7 years ago and who are continuing their illegitimate war against the Yemeni people, culture and civilization, enforce new types of Dark Age realities. Politicizing religious occasions is a hallmark for the rebels in order to drain Yemeni pockets and to sap their life-sustaining incomes. The latest example is their use of the Prophet's birth celebration as a way to gain more money. Usually, the celebrations calls in the Yemenis the memories and days related to peace and mercy spread by the Prophet and his companions. This, however, is totally abused. The poor Yemeni may even forget all meanings of mercy when he is forced by Houthis to pay a donation. The rebels are forcing people in the areas under their control to raise money under the pretext of holding a religious occasion, while on the contrary, they not only siphon Yemeni money but also stoke the war through these donations, violating the religious sublime meanings and diminishing them into worldly gains by the militia may increase the popular discontent with them. Sectarianism and racism may increase due to the Houthi mindset that looks at Yemen as an inherited right, which they hold in the past years before the revolution under Imam's rule in the 60s of the last century. With these new acts of Houthi-led hatred, no place for religious peace could prevail in a country that has been a beacon for religious diversity.
The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced 28 new cases of the COVID-19 in 7 governorates. Committee officials said on Twitter that 7 cases were recorded in Al-Mahra, 7 in Lahj, 6 in Aden, 4 in Hadramaut, 2 in Shabwa, 1 in Al-Dala and 1 in Al-Bayda. Also 5 deaths were recorded plus 15 recovered cases. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 9,495, including 1,798 deaths and 5,990 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. Yemenis nationwide continue celebrating anniversary of the 14th of October revolution when Aden is in chaos and Sana'a under Houthi suppression. United Nations Special Envoy Hans Grunberg briefs Security Council amid Houthi escalation in Ma'rib. European Union and International Migration Organization discuss the situation of displacement. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.